Yeehaw. Hey everyone, good morning. Welcome to Slow News Day Live. My name is Steve-Poikonen. I am hanging out in an undisclosed location. I am joined by my better than your co-host, Glory Jones. What's happening, Glory?
It's a great day if you're a weeb or an anime fan. I'll just put that out there.
It's a great day if you're a weeb or an anime fan. Right on, right on, right on. I have a feeling this has something to do with Attack on Titan, but I'm not entirely sure. At any rate, we are joined today by the host of the Propaganda Report, somebody that I've been on Union of the Unwanted panels with several times. Always enjoy what Monica has to bring to the table. Ladies and gentlemen, Monica Perez, how are you? It's good to see you. Oh, here, let me unmute that there. There we go.
Hey guys, it is such a pleasure to be here. I feel the same way. I love sharing the screen with you on Union of the Unwanted, and I was super psyched when you asked me to be on. And so we could have a little more back and forth. You really have to compete for time there on the Union.
It's, but for some reason, it's like this magical place where you would think that with the amount of ego on screen, there would be people walking all over each other. That never happens. While it is kind of like, patiently waiting your turn, the heavy hitters that come through there, the amount of just kick-ass knowledge that gets shared makes it kind of worth it. But I'm looking forward to stretching this out a little bit. There's been so much crazy shit going on that that it's definitely like worth taking a moment and exploring a little bit. Your show, Propaganda Report, does I think a really good job of cutting through a lot of the bullshit that that saturates the media landscape. And I know that you kind of come out of the like Ron Paul revolution background. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you got from there to 2022 and what you're doing with the show?
Sure, I'm happy to. There was a time I wanted to go back to work. I had little kids. It was totally unrealistic, but I wanted to go back to work, and I was like trying to brush up on financial stuff. And as I was procrastinating on some of the stuff I was studying, but at the same time, my mind was on fire, I happened to discover Hans Hermann Hoppe. And I totally and completely gave up on all, like even the American experiment. I was like, you know what? They tried it and it failed, and you're never getting a better experiment than that. And I was so depressed. But then when I read Hoppe, I was like, oh my gosh, like government is impossible. Like limited government is a utopian fantasy, but it's totally unnecessary because obviously society is self-ordering. And as a waitress where I made nothing and there was no penalty for not tipping, I made no wage. I made tons of money. People just voluntarily paid just out of like fear of shame, maybe, or, that was probably a marginal case. But most of the time, it's because they just wanted to pay for what they were getting and they wanted to come back to that restaurant. It was great. And I knew right away he was right. So I kind of given up. And at that point, I met a radio producer at a wedding, and she just thought what I was saying was super interesting and cool. And I was like, yeah, but you can't put me on like a conservative radio show because I've completely given up on any of it. And I had to search my soul as to how I could bridge that gap. And I realized that if they stuck to the agreement of the Constitution, which isn't my favorite thing, and I think the Articles of Confederation are more legitimate, but if you actually stuck to the Bill of Rights, like we're on the same page. So I agreed to do this show. I just did auditions. It's not like I was a broadcaster. I was terrified of doing it, but I was just like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And it got me kind of off the couch and to be a little more active. So I was asked to speak at a Ron Paul rally, and I always loved Ron Paul. My father supported Ron Paul from New York, even when he was a Texas congressman, even in the 70s. We had 9 kids, no extra money, and he would still send $25 to Ron Paul every campaign. So I knew about Ron Paul, and it was awesome. So I was willing to kind of give it another shot, give this system another shot. And then as I, started to worry about a real revolution, then I thought maybe we can kick this can a little bit if we could just restore the Bill of Rights. And and it was all honky dory. Everybody listening was chiming in when Obama was president. But then when Trump was president, it was like, literally, here is a quote. I was quoting the Constitution, and the comment was, "You are quibbling about semantics." It's like, oh, when it's Obama, I'm not quibbling about semantics. Trump. So then I saw like Q completely absorb all the life force out of what I was doing, out of the Ron Paul kind of movement. And my argument with Ron Paul is like, yeah, I'll take that bargain. You know, if you want to restore the Constitution, I'll take that bargain. Even if you're a limited hangout, I'll take that bargain. But the Trump limited hangout is a bargain that I'm not willing to take, because he would never even acknowledge the Bill of Rights as the goal. So, but even after all that, the radio station I was on was a family-owned business and had a great program director who, like, I think used to work with Art Bell. He was like, "You're the new Art Bell," you know. I was like, "Oh, awesome," you know. And then it got bought by a different company, a company actually where the head of the company stepped down because of Jeffrey Epstein connections at some point. But so I don't really know what was the last straw. But the day my program director left was the day I left, and I had that show for 8.5 years. But the three issues we were talking about was Event 201, Stacey Abrams and election integrity, and Jeffrey Epstein, and that was 2020. It was February 2020. So I don't know exactly what it was, or nothing. Maybe I just suck. But I find that hard to believe, like a chick with a Spanish surname can't fucking hold her own. I can speak, you know what I mean? Like there was the most undiverse thing that had to have some of that. I think it was what I was saying.
So it's interesting that no matter what side of the political line anybody falls, when narrative managers talk about diversity, they always mean diversity of optics, never diversity of opinion. It's diversity of thought is something that's verboten. But if you eliminated me from the screen right now, you'd be winning identity politics bingo. You would be. But this show is shadow banned to hell and gone, demonetized on YouTube, and it's all directly because of the content. We used to get QAnon context warnings.
Oh, those were the days.
At the beginning of 2021, like I'll probably 1 out of every 5 shows would get a QAnon context warning, and from day one, we were pointing out this is a massive psyop. This is the second part
That's
of Russiagate.
That's what they don't want you to say.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they didn't want you to say. But even I will say, to the credit of my program director, he used to say to me, like, I don't care if you're the sexiest, hottest MILF with Spanish surname, with, you know, everything going for you, the smartest girl in the room. If you weren't saying something different, I would not have you on my station. So he got it. And it was literally the day he left that I had to go. And that was an old school thing. It gave me a little insight into media, because it looks to me, it's very easy to just broad brush strokes say everything's controlled completely from the top and it just cascades down and there's no variety whatsoever. But you can also see how that's changed over the years. So I think like JFK was the very first complete lockdown. Then you had Operation Mockingbird. I'm talking about the media. 9/11 was another major, major shift. And then I actually called it on the day of Parkland, February 14th, 2018. I was like, this is the day the internet is completely closed, because I used to be able to crack the code on every single false flag in real time by the time I had my Saturday show. And that was when there was no outside information. There was no evidence. There were no like facts.
Yes.
And then I got a platform from a WordPress. And so this is how things changed so quickly. WordPress platform in August of that year, 2018. They tricked me. And my program director, Pete, said, "Oh, that's awesome. Like, we should make a promo for that." And I was like, yeah, banned by WordPress, welcome by WSB, like hear it here only. Then later, maybe a year later, he said, "Look, you'll never get banned for anything. You'll never get kicked off the air for anything you say on the air. But if you get canceled globally, like if you get kicked off Twitter for something obnoxious, like we won't probably be able to save you from that." And so I was pretty careful after that about how to not recognize the patterns. Even though I got a strike on YouTube and pull down for a show that I did on WSB on that Sheriff Israel at that time. Like that's when they really cracked down. But I could see the change. So I'm just saying, like mainstream media has been getting more and more narrow and worse. And now I do think it's obviously when they sent out a memo that said if you talk about the election, you're going to get fired. If you talk about the election, you're going to get fired. Like I just like what is freedom of speech? Just sex?
Well, it's also whatever you can do to shame someone into following whatever current ritualistic madness of the day is going on, whether you have a certain amount of time to wash your hands or a certain amount of, things that you do when you sanitize or mask, this and that. And there's the, the ritualistic placement at the podium that so many people have to do. And it's just this constant, I don't know, almost like mandala or prayer wheel of things that you have to do in order to keep the cycle going.
I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
And to Pfizer, for which it stands.
Is there a thing called a rendition? I remember like a Navy SEAL or someone saying there's like something you do that's like it's like a ritual action. Is there something like that in like fraternities or whatever where
an initiation, a hazing, that kind of thing?
Yes, I feel like a lot of these things are just obeisances or whatever. Like you can just because they don't make really sense. And if somebody says, okay, you can stop doing that, everyone just goes along with it. It's like it's supposed to be 5 days, it's supposed to be 6 feet, it's supposed to be 10 days, it's supposed to be, and everyone will just like, keep trying to pivot to what they're being told. And it seems very much like they want to fit in. And there was another insight I had on I was on Sam's show the other day with Brian Callen, the conspiracy.
Yeah, I haven't been able to watch it, but I really want to talk about that because I listened to your show from yesterday, and you were mentioning to your co-host that you weren't aware that Brian was an idiot.
Oh, I don't know. I didn't say he was an idiot. I just
no, that's my take. That's my take.
Totally. He wasn't in the rabbit hole with us. But there was, exactly. Pretty much choose your own mask design. But he was talking about ideology. Ideology drives everything. And it was only after the show that I had the insight. It's not ideology because the ideology of the left used to be my body, my choice, crunchy granolas, no vax, no, I'm not doing it. They were anti-vax before it became like gene therapy. And I realized it's not. So now the left is different. So it's not ideology, it's image. So it's the image of being liberal that they want. They don't care at all about the ideology. That's why it's so easy to change out what's in the basket that you're in. It's just all image. And it gets more and more image-y, like more and more where you have to like dress a certain way or like do your hair pink or whatever to show people what basket you're in and how they can talk to you about certain issues. But the ideology isn't a part of it, really, I don't think.
Jones? What are you? I mean, because you guys are both in LA. I will be there in a couple of weeks. It seemed like inside that city, everybody has to have a uniform. And in order for, or it seems like it, and even dressing like gray man style is kind of a uniform in Los Angeles. But when you get out, I've seen it take over even like shit kicker towns, the uniform, and that's what carries over. So you're spot on in terms of it being image or optics. But I also think that there's the point that politics is downstream from culture. That I think is true. I think the culture and that sort of kind of the mentality, the almost spirituality, because I do believe that like where political ideology used to be where spirituality was in terms of where people put their energy. And now it's become a defining thing. And so we've got tech, which is upstream from culture, which is upstream from politics. And what's there is the propaganda. Okay.
I think, but maybe I'm not understanding. So let's figure it out. So it seems to me that policy uses tech to change culture. So I don't think culture pulls policy. I think policy pushes culture. And I think they use tech to do it.
Yeah, I think it used to be the other way around where culture could push politics, but then in the current day and age, it's kind of flipped around to now politics kind of attempts to engineer what the culture is.
So
Because it can, and that's where tech comes in. I don't mean just tech. I mean like birth control pills. I mean technology.
I agree, but let's determine where policy is produced, and policy is not produced at the political level. By the time the politicians get their hands on the policy, it's already come through X amount of lobbyists or X amount of wonks at the World Economic Forum,
yeah, I'm with
or
you there.
and this and that. So the policy itself is upstream from the politics. The politicians have to react to it,
Yeah, I
figure
agree
out
with
how
that.
they're going to spin
Yes,
it, figure
that's a
out
great
how
way.
it's going to appeal to their base. But so that's, I guess that's where
No, that's
I'm
a
coming
great
from.
way to clarify something for me that I have a very hard time like really getting it right. It's like there has to be randomness. It's kind of like the Matrix in the first one. It's like there has to be some randomness or we won't accept it. And there has to be some randomness or it couldn't really be controlled. So you have to have like cordoned off the layers of free action. And maybe that goes with my ethical glass ceiling thing where a politician or anybody, a CEO, will ask questions, is what I'm doing right? And they'll find the answer, yes, it is. And if they ask another question and it says, nah, then he stops asking questions. So there's your ethical glass ceiling. And that could actually be then not just a hierarchy, but a real tiered hierarchy. And this idea of disconnecting policy and politics from maybe the think tanks and the culture incubators, maybe we could call them, makes a lot of sense because when Binkley's brought me some clips from the JFK and school at Harvard, from obviously the Council of Foreign Relations and stuff, but a lot of academic institutions where they have guys who have really deep state, fishy kind of backgrounds, starting in the academic institutions, moving out into other kind of like the law firms or a union, something where it's like an association. And they'll say, we want this industry to implement these standards. And then we are going to have the policy follow suit. Then we're going to have calls for legislation. So I think you're definitely on something. And I love to be able to visualize it that way and to insert the politicians kind of below not only the cultural incubator, but the cultural change is actually, I think, how it works now that you mention it. But I don't think it's organic.
Yeah. Politicians at this point are kind of just like PR for their think tanks and lobbyists and the military industrial complex, because essentially the bills are already written for you. It's just your job to dress it up, put some earmarks in there and then sign it to.
Yeah, they're like the ambassadors or the face job of the thing. You're right. Like even where we're talking, when people are really coming down on Fauci, and we're having Dr. Joel Hirschhorn, who we were on the same Union of the Unwanted, he's coming on our show later this month. And he said on that Union of the Unwanted, I think Fauci is the evil mastermind. And like, I definitely do not think that. He might be the scapegoat. He might be setting up for that, but he's not the ambassador for the policy. Well, he is to some people, but he's also the face of the opposition to some people. And that plays a role too. But I think what I can really get on board with what you're saying in that it's like kabuki theater. And everybody has their roles. And I think a lot of them do not know. I think it's actually essential for that very few of them know the role they're playing. That's why you have like Michelle Bachmann. She was clearly, she was an idiot. So how do you, right? Like, I hate to call people names.
But she had a law degree.
She seemed like an idiot to me. And it's like, if I don't win this election, if we don't stop Iran, they will rain nuclear weapons on us by New Year's. And it's like, that was clearly ridiculous. So she's either an idiot or a jerk, but she's one of those. And you have to have people who I think really believe it. And that's how you have that cordoning off. That's how you have the control without the knowledge, where the conspiracy can be very small if everybody who's working for you is an idiot.
Well, and let's be perfectly honest. Compartmentalization, you're absolutely right. Compartmentalization works because it works because your marketing is effective. your propaganda is effective. This is why January 6th was significantly less violent than most of the shit libs wanted it to be.
It was not violent
so
at
they
all.
could get their own retribution.
Do you
They're
think
still
it was
trying to
violent
do
at
it.
all?
No.
None. Like none.
I
think
I
So-
mean, with
okay,
the
so
exception of like some
Agents
stray,
provocateur.
like some agent provocateurs, some tear gas thrown by
Right,
cops, and
right.
Ashley
Yeah.
Babbitt being shot.
But I don't think Ashley Babbitt was shot.
Oh,
So we
I
can
mean,
get
maybe
into
she
that
was,
too.
but
yeah.
So,
like to get
okay,
into
but
that.
I mean,
so
I don't know
having-
about. I really don't know what happened to her. I shouldn't say that. Maybe whatever. But there was
having
something
been
fishy
well, we
about
can
it.
definitely
Oh yeah, for
we
sure.
can get into that because that's I'm glad you brought that up. But I was there. The violence that I saw was almost all on part of the cops. The violence that wasn't being done by cops was being done by obvious fucking feds. But what my point is that because the vast majority of the people that were there because they believed in the marketing. They believed in their constitutional right to freely assemble, to express their grievances with their government. That's why the vast majority of the people were there. Overwhelming majority. I will
Absolutely.
testify to this every single day. I was there. I talked to these guys the whole fucking week. I was, I got there on January 1st. We had other events that we were doing. It was, we were able to get the lay of the land a full week in advance. It wasn't what is being portrayed really by anybody. But my point is, when they got inside, when the people who bought the marketing got inside, they stayed believing the marketing. It's why they stayed in the velvet ropes. It's why, it wasn't a violent armed insurrection where they were rounding up government officials and lining them up against the wall and then issuing new laws that day. That's what an insurrection looks like.
And it was very hard. This is why I thought that Trump might win, was that I thought they needed violence, and it was going to be easier to get the left because the right was too law abiding. But I think it's important to remember that the First Amendment was written, if I understand it correctly, by violent revolutionaries. So, so they weren't, and they were saying, like, we can do this without violence, or we could do it with violence, but we can do this. I mean, I'm not saying they were saying that the First Amendment was allowing for violence. I'm just saying when Thomas Jefferson says the tree of liberty has to be watered with the blood of patriots and tyrants every, was it like generation or 20 years or something? Like
30 years, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not saying that it goes hand in hand, the First Amendment and violence, but what I'm saying is those people were there to do exactly what the First Amendment was written to allow them to do. And it was actually to support the people inside who were abiding by a process that I think would have worked. And it wouldn't have certified Biden that day.
I mean, when Time Magazine has to put a story on the cover talking about how the election, it wasn't rigged, it was fortified, it was secured, with the hand by these plucky billionaires and some union leaders and some elections boards, they bragged in this article about skirting the Constitution to allow for voting methods to take place. They're openly bragging about breaking the law in order to make the election happen the way they wanted to. And people are like, if you say that it wasn't the freest, fairest, most legit election in the history of always ever, you're literally Alan Dershowitz.
So I need a name for this. I need a word for this. Well, it reminds me of this organization called the Tiebreakers. I mentioned this on the show the other day. Have you ever heard of the Tiebreakers? When I was in Texas, that a friend of mine was telling me about it. I don't know if it's a religious thing or what, but it was a Christian thing, and it was that the husband and wife have equal votes, but if there's a tie, the husband breaks the tie. And you understand that just means that the husband decides on absolutely everything, because the tiebreaker is when you have a disagreement. So I feel like I'm going to say Democrats, even though I don't buy into that left-right thing, the Democrat-Republican thing anyway, that they're all for democracy until they lose. And then it's just, well, that's just on its face without really being able to articulate an argument. And my English teacher in high school is like, if you can't define a word, not using the word, really define it well, then you don't understand the word and you're not really saying, you don't know what you're saying. So with the Democrats, they can't really define what's wrong with the outcome or the process. All they say is anyone who doesn't see that, well, it's just common sense, or you have, like, well, that person is just whatever. But they abandon what they say are their principles. And then it would be good to know what their principles really are, to press them and say, okay, so I don't believe in democracy myself. I do think it would be okay to have a constitutional government that is strictly defined by the foundational documents, like I think we were supposed to have. Really limited democratic process for maybe, the executives and stuff. But I don't, that's obviously never going to work.
Right.
Because if it was going to work, it would have worked, and it's not going to work. So what is it that they're after? If democracy doesn't really work, what do they want? Like, do they want controlled democracy or an educated democracy? Like, what is it that that Time magazine wants if you can't just have a process that always is applied evenly?
Well, what Time magazine wants is people who don't ask questions. Ultimately, that's what they want. They want to be the arbiter of information. They want to be considered one of the trusted sources, knowing that this is owned by Mark Benioff, who did step down from Salesforce, but is still running the deep sea mining projects.
Oh, did he? When did he step down from Salesforce?
A couple months ago.
Oh, I missed that.
He's not
Why?
an activist CEO anymore. Now he's just
saving the world.
Saving
the world is what he said. Why? Why did he step down?
I honestly
no. Okay,
don't
it wasn't
know.
like a scandal. Yeah. Okay.
No, it was right when right when the other rash of CEOs were stepping down to take new positions. Jack Dorsey left Twitter, but there's a rumor that he's going to wind up at the Oklahoma Fed, which is really interesting.
Isn't he a model? I think Jack Dorsey is just a face job. But
I don't. He's so weird, dude. He's so weird.
Jack Dorsey has like some. I forgot what exactly it's called. He's got some weird philanthropic projects going on in Africa right now related to like the metaverse and such and such. Yeah. Vanessa Beeley did a great article about it a couple months ago. I forgot the details of it, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that what Alison McDowell was implying was, or what I got from what she says is that they're just all this like teach African children to code is just a new form of slavery. And you can see like they have all these pictures. It's like, we will give you clean clothes and a laptop and you will sit there.
Yeah. Cardano and Abiy Ahmed putting Ethiopian children on the blockchain, 5 million about to give an estimate of the number just to track their, career trajectories and such and such. Yeah, sure.
The open air prison.
No coincidence whatsoever. And then a couple months ago in Los Angeles, they had the Milken conference where they were talking about their Africa 2050 or Africa 2030 agenda or whatever it is, where they're basically looking at the entire continent as like a hotbed of investment and innovation for them. And it's like, gross.
Maybe that's why they're letting China do Africa, because like if you look at Event 201, you see the China CDC and the US CDC shoulder to shoulder. So there are levels at which they're coordinating, if not at every level. And I'm not saying everyone in China. There's probably like regional people and old families and stuff who aren't in on it. But China
fucking God, dude. Africa. No, just bless you, Monica. Seriously, because that's been our position. It's been our position the whole time.
Yeah,
it is that of course there's going to be petty regionals. People are going to battle for power at every level, but these guys are making deals ultimately at the planning level. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes, and then but I've been trying to figure out what is the China-Africa connection. So I assume that you guys realize like China's all over Africa, and if Europe had to recolonize Africa, well, we're post kind of colonialism, right? So it would be morally wrong of us to do it. But if China does it, they don't have the same background. And, there's something to be said for command and control. I mean, Russia doesn't have the kind of terrorism problems we have because we have that pesky Bill of Rights. You hear that from the right, and that really made me insane. And then if you allow China to do it and say it's beyond your control, you have a much harder time. You don't have to hold them to the standards, the post-colonial, post-slavery service economy standards of Europe, and still you make those deals I don't know how it will shake out, but my guess is that
and
everybody has a seat at the table.
Despite that though, what you mean, sorry, I didn't mean to say that. I was talking to myself. I'm trying to form the words here. Even despite that, a lot of Western countries are still acting in Africa either via these war on terrorism spooked up schemes, like the U.S. in the Horn of Africa right now, or you see that they're still acting via a lot of multinational corporations which operate in and out of Western countries and continue to do deals with them, like all these freaking diamond companies.
I know.
I don't even know.
How can you? Oh my gosh! How can you cancel anything and not cancel De Beers? That's just they don't allow foie gras or Russian caviar, but every single solitary bride in this whole country has a laser.
You're wearing a Tiffany's ring on your finger,
100%.
So
I have many De Beers products on my body. It's all De Beers.
Yeah,
our friend
was called out over 2 decades ago. I think back in 2003, an independent panel of experts reported to the UN, and they called out dozens of multinational companies for perpetuating ongoing conflicts in the Congo and Democratic Republic of the Congo. Nothing really came of that.
There was a minor marketing campaign to get people off of diamonds for about a year. I remember that. Our friend Corey Morningstar has reported extensively on what she's referred to as the digital recolonization of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I've been trying to piece together.
So that's how she frames it. Please check her out if you're not familiar with her, Monica. Corey Morningstar.
I've heard of her, but
El Provocateur on Twitter. She's a badass.
She's awesome.
But if you combine and what realistically accurately is the digital recolonization of Africa, which includes encircling it with fucking cable. Fiber internet cable.
God,
that's what it is right there.
Right
that's
there.
what it is.
No way.
This is Zuckerberg. This is Zuckerberg doing this. The plan is
let's look at the partners,
to give phones and tablets to everyone in Africa that comes preloaded
Can you
with
show
Zuckerberg
me the other one
products.
again?
Yeah.
So I want to see how it handles the Suez Canal.
Goes right through it.
Goes all the way around. Yeah.
Yeah.
But wait, and where does it go up? Is that the Straits of Gibraltar? It just kind of goes up and dips on up there?
Mm-hmm.
We don't have the time. Yeah. It goes on. All right.
I don't know how far up it goes.
So is that a cable?
Yeah.
So that's a
subsea cable.
Giant subsea
like they
cable.
have across the Atlantic. I think they have a couple of those under the Atlantic.
Mm-hmm.
And this is for internet, and this is something that Zuck has tried to do in India. But so what this is, in my opinion, and I'm using a lot of different scholarship and reporting on it, Corey's certainly, but also like Scott Horton and Danny Sherson and all the guys from antiwar.com who have military contacts on the ground, who can report extensively about the ramping up of AFRICOM that has taken place over the last decade, and the fact that as much as everyone tries to claim that Donald Trump was anti-war, he exploded the military presence in Africa. It dropped more drones in 4 years than Obama did in 8, and Barry drones did some shit.
Yeah, no, 20,000 at least a year Obama dropped. So wait, there was some big event. I remember some years ago saying they are gonna finally get AFRICOM a stronghold there because they had been struggling to even put it in Africa. AFRICOM wasn't even in Africa for a while. And what the fuck was it? I kind of think it, maybe it was the whole Gaddafi thing where he said, you get rid of me and terrorism just washes over North Africa. And of course, it's true. We spread terrorism like wildfire when we take out secular leaders. But maybe
But
that
I mean,
makes
hey,
sense.
you'd rather have terrorism across North Africa than a country that can stand up to the IMF and Western hegemony with their own gold-backed currency.
And yes, exactly. And I mean, I hate to champion a guy with like those aren't the politics I would like his politics, but it wasn't as bad as it got after that and how they took over. But also when we spread that terrorism and everything, it doesn't just stop at North Africa. Then they bring them over here on purpose, and then they say, "Oh well, so bad. Sorry for the Bill of Rights, but we have all these terrorists now." It's like, if you took them out of Libya because their civil rights were being suppressed? And now we have to have our civil rights. Why don't you just like let them handle their own problem? We could really just, as they say, like when you have like problems, you chain it back to where the problem started, and it just goes back and back and back and back. You could never
I mean,
stop with where
we
the problems came from.
could, but we'd rather arm, train, and fund those terrorists.
I know. ISIS is us. That's why the Mike Flynn thing was a little effed up, because when he ran the Defense Intelligence Agency is when they put that thing. I was on the Levant report, it was called, and it was this DIA document that said, "Wow, what we need is an Islamic State on the border of Iraq and Syria to give us an excuse to invade Syria." And then they're just like, "Oh, Mike Flynn, he's my hero." I'm like, Mike Flynn's a deep state guy, so I would peel that onion.
People always forgot that Mike Flynn was a Clinton Democrat
I
before
know.
he was Donald Trump's right-hand man. And this is like the Trump derangement syndrome went both ways.
Yes, 100%. Oh my gosh, 100%. And I really I thought I was standing alone. I remember a couple of times on the Union of the Unwanted, I was kind of like, oh, I thought it was obvious. And even Binkley was just like, he might be Batman. I was like, all right, he might be Batman. Like, super billionaire by day, superhero by night.
Thank God Trump is draining the swamp as Mike Pompeo sits as Secretary of State.
Well, it's drained. It's well and truly drained now.
Yeah. And they found all of the scum at the bottom, and they said, "Let's give them jobs."
Hey, so let me ask you a question. Since you were there on January 6th, there was walls around it for a long time afterwards, Washington, D.C. And I was wondering, because I remember when Ron Paul said absolutely correctly, and Michelle Bachmann should have given him big snaps because she got her Swiss citizenship. And he said, walls can keep you in. Yes. And I saw the wall around DC and I thought, shithole countries have walls around their capitals. And it's not just to keep the people out. It's to keep those figurehead puppets in too, I think, maybe.
Glory Jones, please attest to two things. First thing is that when people were talking about supporting Donald Trump because of like the border wall and all of that, like this show was saying, every time you build a wall and you put people on top of the wall with the guns pointed out, as soon as the wall is up, those guns turn around.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's the thing that happened. And then the other thing that happened is that in March on St. Patrick's Day, Glory Jones and I and a number of our friends were standing in front of the NBC building in Washington, D.C. for an Assange related event that we were doing in a fuck censorship co-protest with our friends of the Combo Couch. And the razor wire and blast walls were literally 50 feet away.
Facts. I'm going to see if I can find a picture real quick.
Wow.
This is on St. Patrick's Day when by the time that I got back in the midsummer or beginning of July, that's right, the blast walls and the fence was down, but that was I believe middle of 2021. So really shortly after, just for the first couple of months into the Biden administration, that was kept going. But at any point, the National Guard can be called in. They just passed a thing in the infrastructure bill that allows for this. There's now no I guess anyone to call into question an order from the chief of Capitol Police to the military.
Oh my gosh, I know. And they opened up Capitol Police offices or
Yes.
satellite offices in California and Florida, at least. I mean, I finally realize how the federal policing is going to go, and it's going to be modular. It's going to be like the media. It's good. You're still going to have your own uniform. You're still going to be like the Detroit Press or whatever, Free Press, but that's the only one company is going to own all the police forces. And it's almost like that now.
I was freaking out about this. Well, not freaking out, but I was going off on this. On Friday, I was on the Pro Democracy podcast, which is a great show. It's Alex Rubinstein. And I was on with J. Arthur Bloom, who's currently the managing editor of I believe the oldest conservative outlet in America. Oldest conservative magazine, which the name is totally fucking escaping me at the moment, and I apologize for that. But yeah, we were talking about this. The Capitol Police got a $200 billion bump in pay in branch offices in the two largest metropolitan areas in the country, giving federal police jurisdiction over the nation's capital, over New York City and Los Angeles, where they are entirely unaccountable to any other jurisdiction or the people who live in those cities.
And that's where the vax passports are coming down.
This is, yes, the two biggest places where you have to scan a QR code to get into a door, to get into a public place, where track and trace is at the forefront of all of the legislation. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
LA was, they had to delay the implementation of the vax passport mandate thing for like restaurants and stuff for a few days because one councilman wouldn't sign off on it. And I was like, oh, good for him. But of course, anytime I think anyone is showing signs of thinking for themselves, that's when I'm wrong. So what it was he said, well, we can't have the bouncers and the hostesses being responsible for this. We need enforcement. Like, we can't just okay this without enforcement. And they did okay it without enforcement. But then I was just like, oh, shit. Enforcement is definitely coming. You can't have a law without enforcement. And around here, I think they are not because I took my kids to the barbershop the other day and nobody asked for anything. So
yeah,
maybe maybe they use that as enforcement. But what if this thing just, I mean, surely... I wonder, again, you have to wonder how much control they have over everything. And I remember back in the beginning, 2 years ago now almost, the San Bernardino doctors, remember those two guys? They were just like, the way viruses work is something really virulent gets out, then it gets everywhere, and then everybody gets it, and it's like not that big a deal. That's how you're supposed to do it. They explained exactly how to do it, which probably every doctor in the country would have agreed with until they saw how that would affect their paycheck. And the ethical glass ceiling got a little lower. But now, I mean, I think because I do think the alpha was like COVID alpha, whatever, the first COVID was a bioweapon. I assume that's what it is. Totally artificial. It felt artificial. Delta was, I think, vaccine induced. And then Omicron, I don't know, but it seems to be exactly what the San Bernardino guys would say. So maybe they just can't push it any further.
There was a Mu variant for a little while.
Oh yeah, too. I remember that, and I thought that was going to be like the killer. Yeah, that's right. And that was supposed to be the killer. But I read a long time ago, I did research on psychological operations, and they say that they roll them out, and then they evaluate how they're doing, and then they can double down on them. Like, that's what I think Edward Snowden was, because his story actually changed at a certain point. And I was like, oh, they decided to like push it further than they had ever even anticipated. And then like with this, and I also think they decide which horse to ride, Ted Cruz or Donald Trump or Hillary, once they've rolled out the first phase of these things. So maybe they were trying to go for Mu, and it just would have had to been something out of control, too virulent, that a new thing, because Omicron doesn't even make you lose your smell and taste. So I don't even know if it's the same thing, but I guess it does give positive PCR tests. So what the fuck? I don't know. What do I know?
I mean, well, they they recalled the PCR assays because they throw false positives at anything over 25 cycles. The antigen tests that they use now apparently throw a bunch of false negatives.
Yeah, you can. Yesterday I was in a voice call with a couple of friends on Discord, and like he demanded that his work give him a shout out prop. Basically, him and the people at his work demanded that like they give them COVID tests so they know if they have COVID or not. So like, you know, he was fucking around and he got like 3 negatives using salt water or some shit like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
So-
using the at-home antigen test kits.
So now false negatives would benefit those who would like to see this thing spread if it really spreads that way. Now, I actually am still not convinced that viruses spread face to face, although I do believe that that is a gain of function thing they've been working on for 40 years.
definitely.
So even if all the old studies like the Spanish flu and all those that did not actually demonstrate face-to-face spread, that maybe they have that now, I don't know, but if they do have that and they got a bunch of false negatives, that would actually give people a false sense of security, and then they can go whatever, lick each other's faces and get each other sick without thinking. I don't know. It gets too fucking complicated.
If we're talking about an airborne respiratory virus, then it's not face to face. If you listen to that interview with McCullough on Rogan, where he was saying more often than not, people get sick with this at home where you're in a confined space over a prolonged period of time. It takes a certain amount of hours of exposure for you to get used to this. And so it's less face-to-face and more general inhalation in a confined space. And he has advocated like a betadine base diluted both nose and like mouth rinse, and that as a preventative. And look, I mean, regardless of what you think about it, yeah. He just got dropped back off.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm sure he'll make an appearance too.
Awesome.
But if you going back to March 2020, I said that the whole thing looked like a live fire exercise to me, and I think that over time that's played out. But with the law of declining virulence, which is what this is. The viruses get less lethal and more communicable over time. You would think that all of these countries would be doing backflips, like South Africa did, where they, removed all of their restrictions and all of their lockdown and all of their, you have to do this and that. What makes it not about your health, and so obviously not about your health, is when you actually get nurses and doctors one-on-one, they're scared shitless because of how backwards it's been the whole time. And how counterintuitive to everything that they've been taught about what you're supposed to do when there's a situation like this. Zero communication until just last week on, hey, maybe you shouldn't be morbidly obese or morbidly
I know
overweight.
that came out the first month. So are you saying that the doctors and nurses are freaked out because the policies that are implemented where they work are so different from the wisdom that they've learned over the years? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, if you talk to them when they're, make sure that they know that it's not like you're not putting them on the record, but privately, overwhelming number of the people in the medical profession that I've spoken to are very, very concerned because what they're seeing is counterintuitive to what they've been taught. Right. What they're seeing is counterintuitive in terms of how you would treat any virus, and the fact that you're prioritizing something that is not getting people sick in this Omicron shit. They're prioritizing that, making room and rescheduling appointments for people with terminal illnesses and much more severe illnesses.
And the craziest thing is that they're not allowing people the right to try FDA approved medicines. I mean, that's just unheard of. I mean, doctors prescribe off-label all the time. There's no law against that. And it just doesn't make sense that they would literally deny people hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin when they're dying. I mean, that to me smacks of cynicism. Wow, look at you. Wow.
Oh,
Wow,
such a
that is a
happy
nice
boy.
dog.
Oh,
My son's volunteer thing at school, which he had to really fight hard to let it count, is working at a place where they rescue pit bulls from death row. Yeah, he's got a couple of bites, so, like, he's very proud of. So, but yeah, because his school required that it be a sustainable goal, like, had to be according to the UN 2020 sustainability thing, and he was just like, I don't know, pit bulls are cute. I don't, American
pit
Standard
bulls are
Terrier.
such sweethearts.
Yes. So that's awesome.
Oh, look at his
What's her
big
name?
head.
Yeah, his name
Oh,
is Gomez or Big Rob.
all right.
Depending. Yeah. Right now he's being way more of a
Gomez
Big
after
Rob.
the band.
So okay, so there's if you scratch him like right on the chest, he does this thing with his head that if you look at it straight on, he looks exactly like Raul Julia's Gomez Act.
Of the Addams Family.
Okay. And hang on, there's a second part to this. That giant smile that you just saw, if you look at that straight on, it looks oddly like
Like the
similar
Joker.
to Louis J. Gomez, the stand-up comedian, who when he throws his head back and laughs, usually it's something he said. Hi, Louis. We're friends. It looks very, very much like very pit bull like.
Wow.
He's kind of got that kind of shaped head. So on a couple of different levels, it works. It does.
All right.
I think
we'll call
way
him
too
Gomez
much
or
about
Big
this
Rob.
shit.
No, it's good.
Big
You
Rob.
need a name that's gonna last.
Well, Big Rob, because he's kind of a douchebag that has no respect for your personal space and will just sort of like work his way onto or into a bed with
But
whoever
we
he wants
have a
to. He's
Rob
Big
in
Rob.
chat who's not a douchebag.
Oh.
No,
We
it's
have a
true.
wizard
Our Rob
Rob.
Juno is awesome. Yeah, but he's not Big Rob
Shout
from
out.
Boston. Like I feel like there's a whole backstory here that just doesn't matter for the show.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail, but
I got stoned with my tech guy, and we came up with this whole backstory. Shout out to Sleepy Josh, much love. But yeah. It's so I want to play a clip, and I don't know how long you can hang out, Monica. We got about 10
time.
minutes before
Until
the hour.
somebody tells me my son's running away from home, I'm okay.
So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get rid of the YouTube. Jones, could you, my internet here at this fucking hotel kind of sucks. Could you drop the Rockfin link in the chat, please?
Absolutely.
And then I will kill the YouTube stream and we'll jump over to Rockfin and Odyssey and all the other channels that allow us to think critically and have grown-up conversations about complex or controversial topics like, normal people with nuance and occasional dick jokes, I guess. Yeah, we'll see you over there, everyone. We love you on the YouTubes.